She had spent her entire life moving through the world like a quiet shadow, observing everything while almost no one truly noticed her existence. People passed by without lifting their eyes, conversations happened around her as if her voice did not matter, and even those who cared for her seemed to forget the depth she carried inside. Invisibility had become so familiar that she began to accept it as a destiny carved into her skin, a silent truth she never chose but somehow learned to live with. From childhood to adulthood, she felt like someone who existed only in the background, always present but never truly seen. She listened more than she spoke, gave more than she received, and showed up for others even when no one asked how she was doing. Sometimes she wondered if she was born under a dim star, one that refused to shine no matter how much she tried. Other times she convinced herself that maybe life simply worked that way for people like her, quiet souls who moved softly through the world, unnoticed and uncelebrated. There were nights in which she lay awake staring at the ceiling, the silence pressing against her chest as she whispered to herself a question she never dared to ask out loud: why does no one ever see me? The room offered no answer. Time moved without mercy. And the world continued spinning as if her presence made no difference at all. But in the depths of that loneliness, something subtle began to shift within her. It was not a loud revelation or a sudden miracle, just a small, gentle awareness rising from a place she didn't know existed. A feeling that somewhere beyond her pain, the universe was quietly rearranging itself. A sense that life was preparing a turning point she could not yet comprehend. She didn't know it then, but a moment was coming, a moment when her energy would call the attention of everything around her. A moment when gratitude would ignite a light inside her so powerful that the universe itself would take notice. And from that day forward, her story would no longer be defined by invisibility, but by awakening. As days passed, the weight of feeling unseen grew heavier inside her. It wasn't just about people overlooking her presence, it was the quiet ache of realizing that she had spent years giving pieces of herself to a world that rarely gave anything back. Every time she tried to shine, someone else's brightness overshadowed her. Every time she opened her heart, silence echoed in return. And slowly, without noticing, she began shrinking herself to avoid the pain of being ignored. She stopped raising her hand first. She stopped sharing her ideas. She stopped hoping that anyone would look at her and truly see her. There were moments, small, fleeting, but painfully real, in which she wondered if she mattered at all. During conversations where she became invisible mid-sentence. During gatherings where she stood alone, smiling softly while others exchanged laughter and presence. During the quiet hours of the night, when her thoughts felt loud and her heart carried a loneliness she didn't know how to name. She questioned her worth, her path, her purpose, and even her existence. And the more she questioned, the more the world around her seemed to confirm her fears. Yet something inside her refused to disappear completely. A small spark, fragile, but persistent, whispered that maybe there was more waiting for her than this life of silence and invisibility. Maybe she wasn't forgotten by the universe. Maybe she had simply not awakened what was already hers. And you are listening to this now, maybe a part of you feels this same ache. Maybe you've walked through your own shadows, hoping someone would finally notice your light. If this story is touching you, I want to invite you to do something powerful right now. Comment the word visible so the universe knows you are ready to be seen. And if you feel this message speaking directly to your heart, subscribe to this channel so you don't walk this journey alone. And share this video with someone who needs to hear exactly this, because none of us were created to remain invisible. As she sat with her own pain, something in her spirit whispered that simply acknowledging her feelings was the first step. And maybe, just like you, she was closer to transformation than she realized. Her story was not ending here. It was only beginning to rise. As the days unfolded, she found herself moving through life with a strange mixture of exhaustion and numbness, as if her heart had been carrying a weight it never learned how to put down. She woke up every morning hoping that something would feel different, that someone would smile at her with genuine recognition, that a small opportunity would finally reach her, that life would show her even the slightest sign that she belonged somewhere. But each day seemed to echo the same silence. People overlooked her contributions at work. Friends shared their joys but rarely asked about hers. Even in a crowded room, she felt like a ghost drifting through conversations she couldn't break into. And that quiet ache, the kind only she could feel, began to settle deep into her bones. There were moments when she wondered if maybe the world simply wasn't built for souls like hers, soft, introspective, gentle, and full of unseen stories. She carried so much inside, dreams she never spoke about, ideas she never voiced, hopes she tucked away because experience had taught her that being vulnerable often led to disappointment. She watched others shine effortlessly, gaining attention without trying, while she fought just to exist in someone's line of sight. And though she tried to push those feelings away, each small rejection carved another crack inside her heart. Sometimes, when she felt overwhelmed by her own invisibility, she retreated into silence even more. It wasn't because she didn't want connection, it was because she feared what would happen if she reached out and no one reached back. She knew that kind of pain too well, the sting of speaking and being ignored, the sensation of standing right beside someone yet feeling oceans apart. And in those moments, she asked herself quietly, have I been invisible for so long that I no longer know how to be seen? And maybe, if you're here listening to this, you felt something similar, a moment when the world moved forward without noticing you, when your presence felt small, when your voice felt too fragile to matter. Maybe you've carried your own loneliness like a secret suitcase, one you never learned how to unpack. Have you ever felt that way too? Have you ever wondered if your light was simply waiting for the right moment to shine? Despite everything, something inside her kept beating with a soft determination. A whisper, a pulse, a quiet resilience that refused to disappear no matter how heavy life felt. It was as if a deeper part of her knew, this is not the end of your story, and you were never meant to fade into the background forever. She didn't know it yet, but life was already rearranging itself, preparing a shift so subtle and powerful that it would soon rewrite everything she believed about herself. There came a time when she realized she had become an expert at pretending she was fine. She smiled politely in conversations that left her empty, nodded along to moments that never touched her, and carried herself with quiet grace even when her heart felt heavy. People around her believed she was strong and calm, but they never saw the way loneliness pressed against her chest at the end of each day. She wasn't invisible only to the world, she was disappearing from herself too, slowly losing the connection to who she once dreamed of becoming. There were afternoons when she sat by the window watching the sunlight fade, wondering how something so bright could vanish so quickly behind the horizon. She felt the same way inside, like she had a light that no one noticed, a spark that never had the chance to grow into something greater. She wasn't angry about it, she was simply tired. Tired of giving, tired of trying, tired of hoping the world would eventually turn its eyes toward her. And as that exhaustion deepened, she began questioning if she had expected too much from life or if she had simply forgotten how to expect anything at all. These thoughts followed her everywhere, at work, where her ideas were overlooked, in friendships, where she felt like the second option, in quiet nights when her mind wandered through memories of moments when she wished she had mattered more. She wondered if people knew how much courage it took for her to show up every day, how much strength lived behind her silence, and how much she longed for someone to look at her and say, I see you. Did anyone ever notice how hard she tried? And maybe you've felt this same weight too. Maybe you've walked into rooms where you felt invisible, given your best and received nothing in return, offered kindness that never circled back to you. Maybe you've wondered if there's something wrong with you or if life simply forgot to make space for your light. Has your heart ever carried this kind of quiet sadness? Have you ever felt like you were fading in a world that was supposed to hold you? But even in those fragile moments, something inside her refused to break. A soft resilience lived in her heartbeat, whispering that even though she felt unseen, her spirit was still alive, still searching, still hoping. She didn't know it yet, but the universe had already begun shifting, preparing the moment when her silent strength would be the very thing that made her unforgettable. The more time passed, the more she felt the weight of carrying a life that never seemed to open its arms to her. She watched others receive opportunities she only dreamed of, saw people around her forming connections with ease while she struggled to find anyone who truly understood her heart. She wasn't jealous, she simply wondered why life always seemed to move more slowly for her, as if every blessing had to travel a longer road before reaching her doorstep. This quiet longing became a companion, following her through the years with the delicate persistence of a shadow she could never outrun. She had moments when she questioned whether she had done something wrong, whether she had missed a sign, ignored a calling, or taken a wrong turn somewhere along her journey. Sometimes she would lie awake at night replaying memories, trying to find the exact moment when life began to forget her. Other times she wondered if it had always been this way, if she had been invisible since the beginning, living a life that felt like it belonged to someone waiting for permission to truly exist. The ache of unanswered dreams left her feeling hollow, as though her heart was filled with echoes instead of hopes. And yet, beneath all this heaviness, she still carried a quiet curiosity about the world. She noticed the way the light danced between tree branches during her morning walks, the way certain strangers carried softness in their eyes, the way a simple breeze could make her feel like something bigger was moving around her. Maybe it didn't make sense, but somewhere inside her she still believed there had to be more. She didn't know what more meant yet, she only knew she wasn't ready to give up completely. There were times when she would hold her own hands, grounding herself because no one else seemed to think she needed holding. In those moments she whispered small questions to the universe, questions that were fragile but honest. Is anyone listening? Do my dreams matter? Am I meant for something I cannot see yet? And perhaps you've asked similar questions. Perhaps you've walked through your life feeling like your deepest desires were waiting somewhere you couldn't reach. Have you ever felt like your soul was calling for more even when everything around you felt still? Even with all her doubts, there was something unbreakable inside her, something she couldn't name but could feel rising, slowly, quietly, like a dawn that hadn't yet touched the horizon. She didn't know it yet, but life was bringing her to the edge of discovery. A moment of clarity was approaching, one that would not erase her pain but transform it into strength. The universe, which once felt distant, was already beginning to move in her direction. One ordinary afternoon, when she felt more defeated than usual, she walked into a small bookstore she had passed by 1,000 times but never dared to enter. She wasn't looking for anything specific, only a moment of escape from her own thoughts. The warm light inside the shop wrapped around her like a gentle embrace, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. As she wandered between the shelves, her fingers brushed against a book that fell forward slightly, almost as if it had been waiting for her. Curious, she pulled it out and felt a strange warmth ripple through her chest, the kind of feeling that made her pause and breathe deeper. She opened the book randomly and her eyes landed on a simple sentence that struck her harder than anything she had ever read. Your energy teaches the universe how to treat you. She froze. It was as if the words reached inside her and touched the exact place where her invisibility lived. She read the line again and again, feeling something shift inside her, something small, but undeniable. For the first time, she wondered if she hadn't been forgotten by the universe, but rather, if she had been unintentionally teaching the universe to ignore her by shrinking herself for so long. Her heart trembled with a mixture of fear and hope as she kept reading. She discovered stories of people who had transformed their lives through the law of attraction, using intention, gratitude, and alignment to rewrite their reality. It felt impossible and yet strangely familiar, as if a truth she had always known was finally being spoken aloud. She realized that she, too, had an inner light that wanted to be seen, but she had dimmed it to survive the loneliness. And now, the universe was nudging her to turn it back on. As she moved toward the back of the store, something else caught her eye, a simple notebook, beautifully bound, with a soft, luminous cover that seemed to glow gently under the lights. She picked it up instinctively, and when she opened it, a sudden wave of certainty washed through her. She didn't know why, but she felt this notebook wasn't just a notebook. It was an invitation. A doorway. A promise. She pressed it against her chest and whispered to herself, almost without thinking, maybe this is where I begin again. She didn't know the term yet, but this was the moment she found her manifestation journal. The moment her story started to shift. The moment the universe placed in her hands not just paper and binding, but a tool to reclaim her power. She walked home holding the book tightly, feeling something she hadn't felt in years, a flicker of possibility, a quiet belief that maybe she was meant for more than a life lived in the shadows. That night, she opened the manifestation journal and stared at the blank page. She hesitated at first, unsure of what to write, unsure of how to believe in herself again. But then, with trembling hands, she wrote her very first sentence: "Gratitude is the miracle that keeps the universe in motion." And as the ink dried, she felt something inside her shift, as if the universe had leaned in closer, finally noticing her for the very first time. The next morning, she woke earlier than usual, feeling an unfamiliar pull in her chest, almost like a soft invitation to start her day differently. Instead of reaching for her phone or rushing into her routine, she sat quietly at the edge of her bed, holding her manifestation journal against her heart. For the first time in a very long time, she felt connected to herself, as if she had opened a door that had been sealed shut for years. The silence around her didn't feel heavy anymore, it felt sacred, like a space waiting to be filled with intention. She opened the journal slowly, letting her fingers trace the first sentence she had written the night before. Gratitude is the miracle that keeps the universe in motion. Reading those words again felt like inhaling a new kind of air, an air filled with possibility. She realized that gratitude wasn't just an emotion, it was a language. A frequency. A bridge between her and the universe. And so, with careful handwriting, she began listing every small thing she was grateful for, even the things she once believed were too insignificant to matter. With each word, she felt her body soften, her heart expand, and her energy shift in ways she couldn't explain. After writing, she closed her eyes and whispered gentle affirmations into the quiet space around her. At first, the words felt awkward, unfamiliar, too big for someone who had felt so small for so long. But as she repeated them again and again, they began to feel like a soft truth rising from inside her rather than a script she was trying to follow. She told herself she deserved to be seen. She told herself she deserved to shine. She told herself she was allowed to receive joy, opportunity, and love. And the more she spoke, the more her voice carried a strength she hadn't heard in years. She spent the next few days exploring this new world of intentions, gratitude, and visualization. Each morning she returned to her manifestation journal, writing as if she were carefully reassembling the pieces of her soul, one page at a time. She wrote about the life she longed to experience, the version of herself she wished to become, the kind of energy she wanted to attract. And with every word she wrote, she felt the universe leaning closer, listening, responding. It was subtle, almost imperceptible at first, but unmistakably real, a shift in the way her heart beat when she thought about the future. There were moments when doubt tried to creep in, whispering old stories of unworthiness. But every time those shadows rose, she returned to her journal, grounding herself in gratitude and possibility. She reminded herself that she was learning a new way of existing, a new way of being seen, not by the world, but by herself. She understood now that visibility wasn't only about being noticed, it was about allowing her inner light to exist without apology. As the days unfolded, her affirmations became softer, deeper, more authentic. She no longer repeated them out of hope, they began to feel like parts of her truth awakening. She visualized herself stepping into a life where she felt valued, recognized, and aligned. She imagined opportunities flowing toward her with ease, conversations where her voice mattered, and moments where her presence illuminated the room instead of dissolving into the background. Little did she know, these simple practices were already rearranging the energetic threads of her life. The universe, once distant and quiet, had begun to move. And soon, the first signs of change would appear, small enough to overlook, but powerful enough to shift everything she believed about destiny. As the days passed, something subtle began to shift around her. It wasn't dramatic or loud, it was soft, almost imperceptible, like the gentle change in temperature just before the sunrise. She started noticing small coincidences that felt too precise to be accidents, too aligned to be dismissed. A phrase she had written in her manifestation journal appeared unexpectedly in a book someone mentioned to her. A thought she whispered during her morning affirmations echoed back through a stranger's conversation she overheard. Tiny synchronicities, but they stirred something deep inside her, an awareness that the universe was no longer silent. One morning, on her way to work, she felt compelled to take a different route, even though she had walked the same streets for years. She didn't know why, she simply followed the feeling. And there, along that unfamiliar path, she saw a sign in a shop window that read, "Your light is needed." The words struck her so deeply that she stopped walking. She felt a rush of warmth move through her chest, the same warmth she felt the day she found the book that changed everything. It was as if the universe had placed the message exactly where she would see it, reminding her that she wasn't forgotten, she was being guided. Throughout the week, more signs appeared. People who never paid attention to her started greeting her with unexpected kindness. A coworker who usually overlooked her contributions paused to compliment a small idea she had shared. Even strangers seemed to hold her gaze a few seconds longer, as if sensing an energy about her that had just begun to awaken. These weren't grand events, but to her, they felt monumental. It was the first time in her life that the world seemed to turn its face toward her instead of away. Inside her, something shifted even further. Her steps grew lighter, her voice steadier, her presence softer but stronger at the same time. She realized that gratitude wasn't just changing her thoughts, it was changing her energy. And the universe, responding to that shift, was sending back tiny confirmations that she was finally on the right path. She felt as though life was whispering to her, "I see you. Keep going." As she sat that night with her manifestation journal open on her lap, she wrote about the signs she had experienced. She didn't fully understand what was happening yet, but she knew deeply that it was real. She paused, feeling a wave of emotion rise in her chest, a mixture of relief, wonder, and a soft blooming hope. For the first time, she wasn't writing from longing, she was writing from belief. And if you feel something awakening in you as you listen to this part of her story, if a small part of your heart recognizes these signs, then let this moment be your own confirmation. Let yourself receive it fully. And if this resonates with you, write, "I receive," in the comments. Sometimes, declaring your readiness is the first doorway the universe needs. Little by little, her world was beginning to glow in ways she had never imagined. And although the changes were still small, she felt their power. She didn't know it yet, but the first real transformation was about to unfold. Within just a few days, the shift that had begun as a whisper became impossible to ignore. It wasn't only the small signs anymore, things in her physical world started changing in ways she couldn't explain logically. At work, she shared an idea she had been too afraid to voice before, expecting it to be brushed aside like so many times in the past. But this time, something different happened. People actually stopped and listened. Her coworkers looked at her with a level of attention she wasn't used to, and her manager nodded thoughtfully as if seeing her for the very first time. The moment was brief, but it felt monumental, like a door she had believed was locked her whole life had just creaked open. Later that week, she received an unexpected message from someone she hadn't talked to in years, someone who used to overlook her just like everyone else. But the tone was different now. Warmer. More present. They thanked her for something she had done long ago, something she barely remembered, but it reminded her of a truth she had forgotten: she had always mattered, even in moments when no one said so. That realization settled deep inside her, clearing a space in her heart that had been crowded with doubt for far too long. It wasn't just people who were changing, it was her environment, her opportunities, even the rhythm of her days. A small project she thought she would never get chosen for suddenly opened up, and she was invited to participate without having asked. A neighbor she barely knew offered help with something she had been struggling with for weeks. A stranger complimented her presence, telling her she had a calming energy that made them feel safe. All of these things were small on the surface, but to her they felt like miracles, echoes of a universe finally responding to her shift in energy. One evening, as she walked home, she caught her reflection in a store window. For the first time in years, she didn't look away. She saw a softness in her eyes, a quiet confidence beginning to form, a spark that had been asleep for too long finally waking up. She realized that she was no longer carrying herself like someone trying not to be noticed. Her shoulders were more open, her steps more grounded, her presence brighter in a way she couldn't deny. Each of these changes, though small, felt like threads weaving together a new reality, one where she wasn't living on the sidelines of her life anymore. She wasn't forcing anything. She wasn't pretending. She was simply aligning with a version of herself she had always wanted to meet. The universe wasn't just noticing her, it was responding to her, reaching for her, creating pathways where she once saw only walls. That night, she opened her manifestation journal with a sense of reverence. She filled the page with everything she had witnessed, every shift, every confirmation, every unexpected blessing. Writing it all down made her realize something profound. She was no longer waiting for her life to begin, it was happening right now. And for the first time ever, she felt herself stepping into it with courage instead of fear. She didn't know what was coming next, but she knew this was only the beginning. The universe had started moving around her in ways she could finally feel, and soon, expansion would follow. As the days continued unfolding, the small changes she had begun to experience started transforming into something deeper, more consistent, and undeniably real. She no longer felt like someone waiting for life to happen, she felt like someone finally participating in it. Her mornings carried a different weight now, not heavy, but intentional. She woke with a quiet excitement, a subtle awareness that each day could hold something new, something meaningful, something aligned with the person she was becoming. Even her breathing felt different, softer yet stronger, as if her lungs were learning a new rhythm that matched the expanding energy within her. At work, she noticed that people began turning to her more often, asking for her thoughts, valuing her input, and showing appreciation for her contributions. It wasn't that she suddenly became someone else, it was that she was finally allowing herself to show the parts of her she had hidden for so long. She spoke with more clarity, walked with more intention, and carried an energy that quietly commanded attention without forcing anything. Her presence was no longer a whisper, it was a calm, steady voice rising into the spaces where she once faded. She found herself saying yes to opportunities she would have ignored in the past. A small presentation that would have terrified her months ago now felt like an invitation to step into a version of herself she had only ever imagined. A conversation with a colleague opened a door to a new project, one that aligned perfectly with her passions. Even simple interactions in her daily life seemed warmer, more open, as if people were not only noticing her but genuinely drawn to her energy. What surprised her most wasn't the attention itself, but how natural it felt. She wasn't pretending. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was simply allowing her authentic self to take up space, something she had never believed she was allowed to do. The more she embraced who she was, the more the world reflected that acceptance back to her. It felt like a quiet alignment, a harmony between her inner world and the universe that had once felt distant. She also noticed that her intuition became stronger. She could feel when something was right for her, even before having a logical reason. She sensed when a conversation would bring growth, when an idea should be written in her manifestation journal, when a moment should be honored instead of rushed. This inner guidance, once so faint she could barely hear it, now felt like a gentle compass guiding her toward everything she had once believed was out of reach. Every evening, she returned to her journal with gratitude, not forced gratitude, but genuine appreciation for the way her life was shifting. She documented her progress, her insights, her emotions, and the signs she continued receiving. And each time she wrote, she felt herself becoming more grounded in this new reality. She understood now that her transformation wasn't a sudden miracle, it was a series of small, intentional steps that aligned her with the life she had secretly longed for. The world around her was changing, yes, but it was changing because she was changing. And as she walked through her days with a softness that came from knowing her own worth, she sensed that the universe had only just begun responding to her new vibration. Something bigger was coming, something brighter, something that would stretch her growth even further than she imagined. Her life was no longer defined by invisibility. It was defined by awakening. And soon, expansion would follow. With each passing week, the shifts inside her grew stronger, weaving themselves into every corner of her life. What had begun as small moments of courage now blossomed into a quiet, steady confidence that felt both new and strangely familiar. She started walking into rooms with a presence she had never allowed herself to carry before, not because she wanted to be noticed, but because she finally understood that her existence deserved space. She wasn't louder, she wasn't different, she was simply aligned, and that alignment radiated from her in ways she could feel even before others responded to it. The world around her seemed to mirror this expansion. Conversations felt more meaningful, opportunities seemed to open naturally, and people who once overlooked her now gravitated toward her warmth. She sensed that her energy had shifted into something magnetic, not forceful, but inviting, like a soft light pulling others closer. Even the way strangers interacted with her changed. People made more eye contact, smiled more genuinely, lingered a little longer in her presence as if drawn to a quiet glow she hadn't possessed before. She didn't fully understand it, but she welcomed it with a gratitude that deepened her transformation. Inside her, a new kind of awareness began to rise, an awareness of her own power. Not power in the sense of control or dominance, but a spiritual power rooted in self-worth, clarity, and intention. She realized she no longer needed the world's approval to feel seen. She no longer sought validation from empty spaces or temporary acknowledgments. Instead, she felt a stable recognition flowing from within, a connection to her own essence that she had ignored for years. And that inner recognition reflected outward as a calm confidence that softened her voice, strengthened her choices, and illuminated her path. Her manifestation journal became a sacred companion during this phase of expansion. She wrote in it not only her dreams, but also the insights that flowed through her days. She recorded moments of clarity, unexpected blessings, and the gentle nudges from the universe that whispered she was on the right path. Each page became a tapestry of gratitude, intention, and awakening. And with each sentence she wrote, she felt herself becoming more aligned with the life she had quietly longed for during all those years of invisibility. She noticed that her emotional responses were changing too. Challenges no longer felt like signs of failure, they felt like invitations to rise. Doubts no longer consumed her, they simply reminded her to return to her practices, her gratitude, her affirmations, her vision. She had learned that transformation didn't erase the difficult moments, it simply gave her new tools to move through them. And for the first time in her life, she felt equipped to face whatever came next, grounded in a strength she once believed she didn't possess. Her relationships also began to shift. People who had once overlooked her now listened more attentively. Those who undervalued her began to show respect. New connections formed effortlessly, built not on her attempts to be seen but on her genuine presence. She wasn't trying to fit in anymore, she was simply being herself, and that authenticity created a kind of magnetism she could feel in her bones. Every day, as she watched these subtle transformations unfold, she felt a growing sense of destiny taking shape. It wasn't dramatic or overwhelming, it was soft, steady, and deeply spiritual. She sensed that something larger was guiding her, aligning her steps, expanding her path. And that realization filled her with a peace she had never known before, a peace rooted in the truth that she had always been meant for more. She didn't rush the process. She didn't force anything. She simply kept choosing to believe, choosing to align, choosing to show up with gratitude. And with each choice, she felt herself becoming the person she had once only imagined, seen, valued, aligned, awake. She didn't know it yet, but the expansion that was beginning inside her was about to overflow into every corner of her life in ways that would soon become undeniable. As the inner shifts continued strengthening, her outer world began transforming in ways she had once believed were impossible for someone like her. It started subtly, as most miracles do, an unexpected invitation, a conversation that opened a door she didn't know existed, a chance to participate in something that aligned perfectly with the dreams she had been writing in her manifestation journal. These moments felt almost surreal, as if the universe had been quietly rearranging circumstances behind the scenes, waiting for the exact moment when she would be ready to receive them. And now, she was finally ready. One morning, she received an email about an opportunity she had admired from afar but never dared to pursue. Instead of doubting herself or shrinking back into the shadows, she felt an unusual sense of calm. Her first instinct wasn't, "I'm not good enough," but rather, "This aligns with me." That shift alone felt like a victory. She applied without hesitation, trusting the pull she felt in her chest. She didn't know what the outcome would be, but something inside her whispered that this was part of her unfolding path. Days later, she received the news: she had been chosen. Her heart raced, not with fear this time, but with gratitude so deep it made her eyes fill with tears. She wasn't selected because she forced herself into visibility, she was chosen because her energy had changed. She had changed. And that truth grounded her in a way that made her feel both powerful and humbled at the same time. The universe wasn't just noticing her now, it was responding to her alignment with precision. Her confidence grew softer but stronger, rooted not in ego, but in authenticity. She began stepping into new roles, taking on responsibilities that once would have terrified her. She felt herself expanding emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. Each step forward felt guided by something greater than her own logic, something that recognized her readiness long before she did. And the more she embraced these opportunities, the more they multiplied, arriving with a timing that felt nothing short of divine. Even her creativity flourished. Ideas flowed to her with a clarity she had never experienced. Solutions came effortlessly. Inspiration arrived in waves that pushed her to explore talents she didn't know she possessed. She found joy in expressing herself, whether through writing, speaking, planning, or creating. It was as if every page she had filled in her manifestation journal had awakened dormant parts of her soul, inviting them back into the light. Her relationships evolved as well. She began attracting people who resonated with her new energy, individuals who valued depth, honesty, growth, and connection. These relationships didn't drain her, they nourished her. Conversations became richer, more intentional, filled with meaning instead of noise. Some old connections naturally fell away, not out of conflict, but because she had simply outgrown the spaces she once tried so hard to fit into. She realized that visibility wasn't about being seen by everyone, it was about being seen by the right people. As she moved through her days, she noticed how her energy influenced her surroundings. Workspaces felt lighter. Interactions felt warmer. Even her presence in the world seemed to ripple outward in ways she didn't fully comprehend. She wasn't forcing anything. She wasn't pretending. She was simply aligning, allowing, and trusting the unfolding of her journey. And that surrender opened doors she had once believed were locked forever. Each night, she documented everything in her manifestation journal, every opportunity, every blessing, every shift, every realization. She wrote not just to remember, but to honor the journey that had brought her here. As she wrote, she felt the truth sinking deeper into her heart. She was expanding, growing, blossoming, becoming. And the universe was expanding right alongside her. Little did she know, the biggest transformations were still ahead. The expansion she was experiencing now was only the beginning of a life that was about to open far wider than she ever imagined. As the weeks unfolded, the expansion she had once only written about in her manifestation journal began shaping her life with a clarity she could no longer call coincidence. Everything she had quietly dreamed of, everything she had whispered into her affirmations, everything she had visualized in the privacy of her heart, pieces of all of it began materializing in her reality with a grace that felt almost supernatural. It was as if the universe, having watched her step into alignment, was now opening pathways she didn't know existed, revealing a destiny that had always been waiting for the moment she would finally believe she was worthy of walking into it. Opportunities that once felt miles away now reached out to her with ease. She was invited to participate in meetings with people she admired, trusted with responsibilities she once believed belonged only to those louder and more confident than she used to be. But instead of shrinking or doubting herself, she stepped forward with a calm assurance she had never known before. She no longer entered rooms hoping to be unnoticed, she arrived with a quiet certainty that she belonged exactly where she stood. And her presence carried a depth, a softness paired with strength, that made people listen when she spoke. Her creativity blossomed in ways she didn't expect. Ideas flowed into her days like waves, each one clearer, bolder, and more aligned than the last. She felt guided, almost as if each inspiration was whispered directly by the universe. She began developing projects she once hesitated to even imagine, trusting the vision that unfolded inside her. Every time she doubted, she opened her manifestation journal and reread the intentions she had written, the gratitude she had recorded, and the hopes she had dared to express. Those pages reminded her of who she was becoming, grounding her in faith whenever uncertainty tried to return. Her personal life shifted as well. Connections deepened. Old wounds softened. People who resonated with her new frequency seemed to appear effortlessly, individuals with genuine hearts, supportive spirits, and intentions that matched her growth. These relationships didn't drain her, they nurtured her. They mirrored her evolution, honored her pace, and celebrated her transformation. Some old bonds faded naturally, and instead of feeling abandoned, she felt liberated. She understood now that not everyone is meant to walk every chapter with us, and that letting go sometimes creates sacred space for what is truly aligned. She also began experiencing moments of recognition that stirred emotions she didn't know how to process at first. Someone thanked her for her kindness in a moment she barely remembered. A colleague complimented her presence, saying she made the room feel calmer. A stranger approached her to say her energy felt comforting. These small acknowledgments touched her deeply, not because she needed validation, but because they reflected something she already knew: she was finally being seen. And more important than that, she was finally seeing herself. There were evenings she would sit alone in her room, the soft glow of her lamp illuminating the pages of her manifestation journal, and she would feel overwhelmed by the beauty of her own unfolding. She realized she wasn't living in the shadows anymore, she was stepping into her own light. And it wasn't loud or dramatic. It was gentle, steady, rooted in gratitude and intention. She was expanding from the inside out, and the world, unable to ignore that kind of transformation, was expanding with her. And though her journey still had many layers to reveal, one truth had become undeniable: the woman who once felt invisible was slowly becoming someone the universe itself couldn't look away from. As her inner expansion became undeniable, something remarkable began happening around her. The world started responding in ways she had once only imagined in the quietest corners of her heart. People who had never noticed her before suddenly began seeking her out, not for what she could do for them, but for the presence she now carried. Her calm energy drew others in, her quiet confidence inspired trust, and her authenticity made people feel safe in her company. Without trying to impress, she impressed. Without raising her voice, she was heard. Without demanding space, she created it simply by being herself. At work, her ideas not only gained attention but also sparked conversations that spread far beyond the rooms where they were first spoken. A project she had contributed to quietly became one of the most praised initiatives of the month, and her name, her actual name, was mentioned with respect in meetings she wasn't even present in. It was a strange yet beautiful feeling, hearing that others were speaking well of her even when she wasn't looking. She wasn't used to it, but instead of shrinking back into old patterns of self-doubt, she let herself receive it. Slowly. Gently. With gratitude. Outside of work, the recognition grew even more profound. She was invited to participate in small community events, asked to share her insights with groups she had admired from a distance, and approached by people who told her that something about her felt inspiring. At first, she didn't understand what they meant. But as she listened, she heard the same message repeated in different words. Her energy had changed, and people could feel it. She had become a lighthouse without even trying, soft, warm, steady, and quietly powerful. She also began noticing how her presence impacted others. Friends confided in her more deeply, saying that being near her made them feel calmer, clearer, or more hopeful. Strangers complimented her aura, telling her she radiated peace. Even brief interactions, moments that once felt like nothing, now carried a spark of connection she had never experienced before. It was as though the entire world had learned to speak to her in a new language, one that reflected the love, gratitude, and belief she had been cultivating inside herself. There were moments when the magnitude of this transformation made her emotional. She would look at her life, at the recognition, the kindness, the opportunities, the alignment, and remember the days when she felt invisible, unheard, and forgotten. She realized now that those days had shaped her strength, not her destiny. She had not been unnoticed because she was unworthy, she had been unnoticed because she had not yet stepped into herself. But now, her energy had risen, and the world had risen to meet it. And if you're listening to this and feeling something awaken inside you, some small recognition that maybe your path is opening too, then let this be your reminder that transformation doesn't happen only to certain people. It happens to those who choose it. If this part of the story resonates with you, my love, leave a gentle comment below and let me know you're here. And if you haven't yet, consider subscribing. Sometimes walking this journey with others makes the path feel a little lighter. Because for her, this was only the beginning of being seen, not just by the world, but by destiny itself. As she reflected on everything she had lived, the pain, the invisibility, the awakening, the expansion, she realized that the greatest transformation had not been in the world around her but in the world within her. She was no longer the woman who moved through life apologizing for her existence. She was no longer dimming her own light to avoid being misunderstood. She was no longer shrinking herself out of fear that no one would notice her. Instead, she had become someone who understood the quiet strength of her own soul, someone who honored her worth, someone who recognized that she had always been enough. And that realization alone felt like a rebirth. She sat with her manifestation journal one final time that evening, not to ask for anything, but to give thanks. She filled the page with gratitude for everything, the moments that broke her, the moments that healed her, the moments that guided her back to herself. Because now she understood a truth she had once struggled to believe: every step, every setback, every silence, every unanswered prayer had been leading her here. To this alignment. To this expansion. To this version of herself who finally felt seen by the universe. And as she closed her journal, she whispered softly, "Today, I choose to believe." She then looked around her room, feeling the kind of peace that sinks deeply into the bones. She could sense the universe breathing with her, moving with her, opening pathways ahead of her that were wide and bright. She no longer feared the unknown, because she had learned to trust the guidance that lived within her. She no longer doubted her worth, because she had seen the evidence of what happens when she aligns with it. And she no longer felt invisible, because she had become someone impossible to overlook, someone illuminated by her own gratitude, intention, and faith. If you are listening now, my love, Let this be your reminder that the same power that transformed her life lives inside you too. You are not forgotten. You are not overlooked. You are not behind. You are simply in the middle of your own awakening. And the moment you choose to align with gratitude, everything begins to shift. The universe leans closer. Doors open. Opportunities find you. And your light, even if it has been quiet for years, begins to rise again. So breathe deeply. Trust your path. Believe in your worth. And remember, gratitude is the miracle that keeps the universe in motion. If this story touched your heart, leave a word that represents what you're ready to receive next. If you feel connected to this journey, subscribe to this channel so you can walk it with us. And if you know someone who needs this message, someone who feels invisible, unseen, unheard, share this video with them. You might be the light that helps them rise. And before you leave, my love, leave a gesture of gratitude in the comments. Sometimes a simple thank you is enough to open a new door. Because her story is not just hers, it's an invitation. An awakening. A reminder. And now, the universe has noticed you too.